inhibitors in type 2 diabetes. Dr. Tayyab Hasnain is Assistant Professor of Medicine in Sargodha Medical College, Sargodha.
Of euglycemic state providing both hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia. Regarding prevalence of diabetes, 20 million people in Pakistan are diabetic patients, around 11%. It is quite high as compared to the rest of the population in different parts of the world. Presently, Pakistan ranks 7th in the world with diabetic population, and it will jump to 4th position by the year 2030. And it is increasing at a rate of 25% per year. It's very fast rate of incidence of diabetes. And what's the reason? As Dr. Shahid mentioned, the main reason of all metabolic syndrome is obesity, increased waist circumference. Obesity is the main cause. And what is the cause of obesity? Sedentary lifestyle, unhealthy lifestyle, unhealthy diet. So for type 2 diabetic patient, obviously main factor, one of the main factors is genetic component, and second acquired component which is important is obesity. So if we address obesity, we can treat diabetes. So people often ask that is there any cure for type 2 diabetes? Yes, there is cure. If we reduce obesity, if we cut off obesity, patient can be cured of type 2 diabetes. So main focus should be on treating obesity. Medication most commonly associated with emergency medical admissions. We can see from this chart that medications which are associated with hospital admission, warfarin taken at its top, causing bleeding, and we see daily number of patients coming with overdosing of warfarin, with GI, and even sometimes life-threatening like intracellular. But if we see at the second chart, second line, this is insulin, and the fourth one is oral anti-diabetic drug. They call almost 15% of hospital admissions due to medication, and the reason is hypoglycemia. Obviously, among oral anti-diabetic drugs, the most common drugs causing hypoglycemia are sulfonylureas. What is the impact of hypoglycemia? It causes increased morbidity as well as mortality. These were 3 trials: ADVANCE, ACCORD, and VEDIT trial, which was included in year 2008. They were published in New England Journal of Medicine. These trials, they saw the purpose of these trials were roughly similar to see that if intensive blood glucose lowering can have any micro as well as macrovascular benefit or not. And these 3 trials, they saw that when we do intensive glucose lowering strategies, the incidence of hypoglycemia increases, and it is around 0.7%. ADVANCE trial, 3% as compared to 1% versus standard, and 12% in the VEDIT trial. And they saw that incidence of hypoglycemia increases, and whether this gave an extra micro or macrovascular benefit, they saw that there was no macrovascular benefit from this intensive glucose lowering strategy. And what they meant by intensive glucose lowering strategy was targeting an HbA1c less than 6.5. And less the standard mechanism that was maintaining an HbA1c between 7 and 7.5. And the incidence of hypoglycemia was lower when they did the intensive glucose lowering strategy. Only benefit was seen in ADVANCE trial, in VEDIT trial, that there was only 20% reduction in the progression of microvascular complication, and that was the incidence of nephropathy and reduction in the progression of microalbuminuria, and there was no effect on retinopathy, no effect on neuropathy, and no effect on macrovascular event. So avoiding hypoglycemia is very important. And how can we avoid this hypoglycemia? So while we manage diabetes, our strategy should be that we maintain a euglycemic level, but not at the cost of increased hypoglycemic events. Hypoglycemia also causes cardiac ischemia. In a study, there were 54 patients who suffered hypoglycemia, and 10% patients had episodes of chest pain and angina, and out of them, 6 had the abnormalities as well. So hypoglycemia causes cardiac ischemia as well. How we can avoid that? This was study, they compared glimepiride was added to metformin along with sitagliptin with metformin. The purpose was to see the efficacy and safety. We can see that incidence of hypoglycemia was less big. That was only 7% with sitagliptin plus metformin as compared to 22% with glimepiride and metformin. The point is that this was significant difference. So if we combine sitagliptin with metformin instead of a sulfonylureas, this hypoglycemia can be minimized. And why this sitagliptin, which is called a DPP-4 inhibitor, it reduces the incidence of hypoglycemia. This we will discuss. For this, we have to understand the pathophysiology of diabetes. Diabetes is a tripod which stand on three legs. One of them is pancreatic beta cells, which causes decreased insulin secretion. And the second one is peripheral uptake of glucose by adipose and muscle cells. And the third one is hepatic glucose output in the form of gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis. So glucose level in the blood is the balance of these three legs. So if we have to manage diabetes, we will have to address all the three legs. In what happens in type 2 diabetes, as we have discussed, the main cause is obesity. Whenever a patient has obesity, gets to reach the adipose content of the fat cells increases. And when the adipose content, the fat content of fat cells, adipose tissue increases, the insulin receptors on the surface of adipose tissue, they get down-regulated, they get shifted into the cells, and the patient develops insulin resistance. Only way to cure this is that if we reduce adipose content, the fat content of adipose tissue by exercise, by lifestyle modifications, and maybe some drugs or genetic testing, then we can reduce that adipose content, and when the adipose content of fat cells and muscle cells decrease, those receptors, insulin receptors will get upregulated, they will be shifted back to the surface, and patient insulin resistance will decrease, and that's how we can treat cause of type 2 diabetes. So the cure of type 2 diabetes is the weight reduction, with lifestyle modification, with drugs, and with other mechanisms. The first one is that. After that, when the patient of type 2 diabetes develop insulin resistance, with passage of time, initially pancreas compensates for that by increasing insulin secretion from the beta cells. But with passage of time, pancreas gets exhausted and decompensates, and patient develops hyperglycemia. Although those diabetic patients are relatively hyperinsulinemic as compared to a normal person, but that hyperinsulinemia is not enough to compensate for increased insulin resistance. So patient develops relative insulin deficiency. And when patient develops relative insulin deficiency, patients have increased glucagon excretion, and then glucagon acts on the liver cell, causing gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis, causing hyperglycemia. So to manage type 2 diabetes, we'll have to consider these three legs. And how these DPP-4 inhibitors act. Whenever a person eats, the food goes into the intestine, and the intestinal cells, duodenal cells, and as well as ileal cells, they secrete GIP, which is called glucose-dependent insulin-tropic polypeptide. And the second one is, which is released from ileal cells, causing, which is called glucagon-like peptide 1, GLP-1. These are called incretins. And when a person eats meat, intestinal cell release these incretins in the form of GIP and GLP. And what they do, they act on the pancreatic cells and they cause increased insulin sensitivity, increased glucose sensitivity of these pancreatic cells. So when they will cause increased insulin secretion, and along with that, GLP-1 has additional effects. It acts on beta cells and alpha cells of the pancreas, causing reduction of glucagon excretion. Plus, it also decreases, delays gastric emptying, causes sensation of satiety, and to some extent, it also acts on insulin resistance as well. So DPP-4, these incretins have multiple mechanisms. But the problem is that the GLP and GIP have very short half-life. They are rapidly degraded by the enzyme dipeptidase 4, which is called DPP-4 enzyme. So if we inhibit this DPP-4 enzyme, with some DPP-4 inhibitor, the half-life of GLP and GIP will increase and they will cause these effects. So this is a very effective mechanism. That's why this is the key difference between a sulfonylurea and a DPP-4 inhibitor. Sulfonylureas cause increased insulin secretion irrespective of glucose in the intestine. Whether a person eats or not, they cause increased insulin secretion, and that's why they cause hypoglycemia when there is no glucose in the stomach. In contrast, DPP-4 inhibitors cause insulin secretion only when a person eats, and they do not cause directly on the pancreatic cells. They just increase glucose sensitivity of pancreatic cells. So if the glucose content will be low, then insulin secretion will be low. That's why they will not cause hypoglycemia or very minimal hypoglycemia as compared to a sulfonylureas. Plus, it acts on second level. It decreases glucagon excretion and decreasing hepatic glucose output. So dual mode of action causing effective blood glucose reduction. In this slide we see that type 2 diabetics, why they develop with passage of time decrease insulin secretion, because they have impaired incretin effect. The effect of the GLP-1 and GIP decreases with passage of time and they develop decreased insulin secretion. This was a study. We can see that in the left column, the type 2 diabetes, the normal controls when a person eats food, insulin secretion goes up. But in right column, the type 2 diabetic patients, the insulin secretion is less as compared to a normal person because of decreased insulin effect. So this is a summary of mechanism of action of other anti-diabetic drugs, sulfonylureas, improving insulin secretion, similarly macrolides, thiazolidinediones, we know decrease insulin resistance, similarly metformin decreases hepatic glucose output, and DPP-4 we have discussed. So if we combine sitagliptin with metformin, we can address all the three ends. With DPP-4 inhibitor, increasing insulin secretion and reducing hepatic glucose output. And with metformin, decreasing hepatic glucose output and decreasing insulin resistance. And by this combination, we can break all the three limbs which are the cause of type 2 diabetes. So it's very effective combination, theoretically as well as practically. So this is the conventional approach which we have been practicing. That when we start managing a diabetic patient, starting with diet and exercise, then monotherapy, titrate, increasing the dose, then shifting to combination therapy, then insulin. But by this we can only reduce HbA1c to around 8. But if we start an aggressive approach, we shift this monotherapy and start combination earlier, we can see that HbA1c reduces to around 7%. So if we start early combination therapy as compared to the previous approach, we can have an effective and lower HbA1c as compared to a conventional approach, delayed combination therapy. So the message is that we should start early combination therapy, especially a combination which addresses these elements. So this is a ACE algorithm. Quite not very clear that if HbA1c is less than 7.5, start with one drug. If it is between 7.5 to 9, start with 2 drugs. And if it is more than 9, then start triple therapy, or you may start insulin, especially if the patient is symptomatic. This is the practical difference when we start sitagliptin and metformin. We can see that only if we give sitagliptin, 0.8% reduction in HbA1c, but if we combine with metformin, 50 over 500, 1.6% reduction in HbA1c, and if we increase the dose 50 over 1000 metformin, 2.1% reduction in HbA1c. It is fairly effective. Similar glycemic control with sitagliptin and glipizide. So in this study we can see that sitagliptin is non-inferior to glipizide when added to metformin in reducing HbA1c, almost similar HbA1c reduction with both sitagliptin and glipizide. So this is non-inferior to glipizide in terms of efficacy. But in terms of weight gain, glipizide causes weight gain. On the other hand, sitagliptin caused weight reduction, and the p-value was significant. It caused almost 2.5 kg weight difference between the two groups. So the other benefit is that it causes weight loss, which is desired in type 2 diabetes. So sitagliptin in older patients caused significant HbA1c reduction as compared to placebo in this study, 0.5% HbA1c reduction. When added to metformin therapy, as compared to placebo, sitagliptin patients achieved 13% of the sitagliptin patients achieved an HbA1c of around less than 7 as compared to 5% with placebo. So it is safe and effective in insulin as well. This was a study conducted in China, India, and Korea. It again proved that sitagliptin is fairly effective with reducing HbA1c by 0.7% as compared to placebo. So these are the targets. ABC of diabetes A, maintain an HbA1c of less than 6.5, blood pressure of less than 138, obviously by James series less than 140/90, LDL of less than 100 in diabetic patients, HDL of more than 40, and triglycerides less than 150. So this is ABC of diabetes. So to summarize, what is common in gliptins? They are oral therapy, efficacy comparable to oral anti-diabetic drugs like sulfonylureas. They are mean independent. They have not to be given necessarily with mean like sulfonylureas. They can be given any time, and they can be given once daily as well. Minimal hypoglycemia without weight gain, rather weight loss. So these are benefits of gliptins and DPP-4 inhibitors, and they can be given as monotherapy as well as combination with other drugs, with all drugs. Sulfonylurea, although they should not be given with sulfonylurea, they can be given with metformin, they can be given with pioglitazone, and they can be combined with insulin as well. Although reducing the dose is desired, and should be combined with insulin so that patients do not develop hypoglycemia. And there are concerns about cardiovascular safety, that whether there is any adverse event. There were some studies which given that they might cause heart failure or ischemic heart disease, but it's not proven yet. And cardiovascular safety trials are ongoing. This is how we can compare sitagliptin and vildagliptin. So vildagliptin has a short half-life as compared to sitagliptin. So vildagliptin, that's why it's given twice daily, and sitagliptin is given once daily. This was a meta-analysis of 38 controlled trials comparing efficacy of incretins. We can see that vildagliptin and sitagliptin, 0.79% reduction of HbA1c as compared to 0.67 with vildagliptin. So this meta-analysis proved that sitagliptin is more effective than vildagliptin, which is another DPP-4 inhibitor. Sitagliptin has shown non-inferiority with metformin, while vildagliptin has not shown non-inferiority with metformin. Sitagliptin has shown non-inferiority with glipizide and glimepiride. Sitagliptin has shown greater efficacy as compared to alpha-glucosidase inhibitors. So, fair amount of data showing efficacy of sitagliptin. Other benefits that sitagliptin can be used in hepatic impairment, child APC, and vildagliptin cannot be used with ALT more than 3 times normal. Sitagliptin can be used in renal failure by reducing the dose. It's the only sitagliptin which is studied in renal failure. And these are different trials, ongoing trials, to see the safety of cardiovascular, number of trials, but there is no trial planned with vildagliptin for probable cardiovascular safety. 81 trials have been done on sitagliptin as compared to other gliptins. So take home message is that sitagliptin once daily is as effective as vildagliptin twice daily, both in terms of glucose lowering as well as controlling glycemic effects. Safe in liver disease, it can be given in child ALT, it can be given in chronic renal failure, and it has beneficial only minimal hypoglycemia as compared to sulfonylurea. So, DPP-4 inhibitors are an effective strategy to control diabetes, avoiding hypoglycemia and weight gain.